Hey guys, Miss Kennedy here from Algebra Student, and today we're looking at factoring and solving. And so in this problem, the first problem with this problem, is that it's equal to 3. And so the first step is that you need to get your pen, and then you need to subtract 3 from both sides, because this needs to be equal to 0 so that you can do the factoring. So that's always your first step, is set it equal to 0. So if I subtract 3, I have to subtract 3 from the other number on this side of the equation, and that's the 31. So that's why the minus 3 goes there. So 31 minus 3 is 28. 3 minus 3 is 0. And now I can bring the rest down. So 3x squared minus 19x, and this is a positive 28. All right, so step 1 is done. Step 2 is to find the greatest common factor for 3 and 19 and 28. And when I think about those numbers, the 3 is pretty small. So my first question is, does 3 go into those other numbers? And it doesn't. 3 doesn't go into 19 without a remainder. So I know that 3 is not a GCF, a greatest common factor. And then 3 is a prime number. The only other thing it will divide by is 1. And that doesn't help us. That doesn't change anything with the numbers. So there's no GCF. But we have to check. So that's our first step. All right, so now we're going to multiply. Remember, this is ax squared plus bx plus c. That's the little standard form equation of a quadratic. So we're going to multiply a times c. So a times c is 3 times 28. And we'll pretend that I can do this in my head. 4, 2, 6, 8. Does that sound right? 4, 2, 6, 8. That made lots of sense. Not trusting myself on this Monday morning. So 84. Okay. So I'm looking for factors of 84, things that will multiply to give me 84, but that will add to give me my B term, the negative 19. So when I do that, what I'm looking at is, when I say factors, I mean things that will multiply to give me 84. Now, if you're on a multi-view, which I highly recommend, there we go, TI-30XS multi-view. It's got to be multi-view. Don't get the 30XS. That's not. All right. Then you can hit the table button, and you can type in, when you hit table, you'll get a y equals screen, and you just type in 84 over x, and the x is the number beside the 4, and hit enter 4 times. And it'll give you a table of values like 1 and 84, and 2 and 42, and 3 and something. 3 and 28, duh, because that's what I just did. And 4 and 21. And you're looking for things that will add to give you a negative 19. So that means they would all have to be negatives for that to happen. And so far we haven't found it. So 84 over x. Make sure I wrote all those numbers down right. 4 and 21. And then 5 is 84 over 5. So that's not a factor because that's a fraction. And that's the nice thing. I always tell my students, this is like the one time in math when you can be like, oh, it's a fraction, not dealing with it, because, you don't have fractions for factors. And then 6 and 14, and 7 and 12. And I think we finally found our answer. So this is a lot of hunting here. So what I'm looking for is things that would add up to give me a negative 19. This would be negative 85. So this is not what I'm looking for. This would add up to negative 44. That's not what I'm looking for. And I'm not going to go through each one, but just see if you can figure out which one's going to add up to negative 19. And of course, not surprisingly, it's the one that I ended with and stopped on. But you can keep going if you didn't see it. Lots of times you don't even have to use this many. Lots of times it'll come up sooner. So negative 7 and negative 12, that adds up to negative 19, but it multiplies to give me a positive 84, and that's what I needed. So I go back to the problem, and I'm going to bring down the first term, 3x squared, and then I'm going to write these two terms because I'm just splitting up negative 19x into two terms, negative 7x and negative 12x. Think about it. Those add up to be the same thing. So I'm not changing the equation other than I'm just rewriting it in a different way. And then I'm going to bring down the positive 28. All right, I'm going to draw a line down the middle and split this into 2 and 2. And now I'm going to just look for the greatest common factor of these two. So I'm only looking at half of the problem. So the 3 and the 7 don't have a number in common, but they both have an x. So I'm going to divide out the x. And when I divide out x from 3x squared, I still have the 3, but there were 2 x's on top, and I took 1 away. So that leaves me with 1x. And I still have the negative 7. And these x's, I had 1 on top. I took 1 away. So I have, none left. We might say they cancel. We might say they divide out. Teachers use different terminology for that. Over here, if this is a negative, I know that I'm going to divide by a negative. Whatever I'm dividing by, it's got to be a negative. And then I've got to think of my GCF for 12 and 28. So I can come down here. Let me change color just so we're not too super confusing with this. Let me slide this up. All right, so 12 and 28. I know that 12 doesn't go into 28. They don't all end with a 0. They don't end in 5 or 0, so they're not going to divide by 5 or 10. But they're both even, so I'm going to divide by 2. And now I can divide by 2 again. And now 3 and 7, those don't have a GCF. So my GCF is going to come from 2 times 2. So 4. All right, so let's go back up here, change back to blue. So I'm dividing by a negative 4 here because you take out the GCF of the two terms. Negative divided by negative is positive, and that's 3x. And positive divided by negative is negative, and that is 7. Now, notice this term and this term are the same, and that's where you go, whew, all right, I'm on track. Yay, good deal. They should always be the same if you've done this correctly. All right, so the first part in front of the parentheses, that's going to be my first factor, and the part that was in common inside the parentheses is my second factor. Whew, that's a process, isn't it? And we're not done yet. Okay, so we have factored this, but notice that the directions say to factor and solve. So solving means that we're going to, let's see, I haven't made this quite sloppy enough. Let's take it over here. Let's set these equal to 0. So I'm going to set the first factor equal to 0 and the second factor equal to 0. So this is like two separate problems here. So if x minus 4 is 0, then I'm going to add 4 to both sides and get x is 4. That is one of my solutions to this quadratic equation. And then I'm going to set this equal to 0 by adding 7 to both sides and then divide both sides by 3. So I get 7 over 3. That's the second answer or solution to my equation here. So my answer is that 4 is a solution and 7 over 3 is a solution. These are brackets, funny looking brackets. They're not parentheses because this is not a coordinate pair. These are both x values, just so we're clear. All righty. So that is the answer to the problem from way back up here where we had to factor and solve. It's a process, but you can do it.